In my years as a developer, I've seen projects grow in complexity, not because of challenging business logic, but because of redundant, inconsistent database and API interactions scattered throughout the codebase. And I hit this wall a few years ago when my team's application had, hear me out, 47 variations of what should have been the same customer lookup query with some slight variations and differences. So what if we could change that? What if every query you write could be easily shared, versioned, and reused across your entire organization? Imagine the time you'd save, the consistency you achieve, and the headaches you'd avoid. That's exactly what we're diving in today with Appsmith Packages reusable queries. We are about to explore how this feature can transform the way you interact with your data sources, making your development process smoother, faster, and more maintainable than ever before. Let's learn it with a few hands-on examples. Alright, let's learn packages. First, by building a very simple package so you understand the interaction with it, and then let's build a real package using real-life applications so you can see the true power of it. Alright, here in the Appsmith workspace dashboard, you will see the create new dropdown, which we had applications, workflows, which we have talked about, and now package. So let's select the package, let's give it a name. I'm going to call it users. We're going to be managing user data here. And then you will need to create your data source. Now I already have mine, which is a Postgres database that manages users' data. It's very simple user data, to be honest. But once you have your data source connect, you will go to the modules section in the editor, click the plus icon, create a new query module or a JavaScript module, which we'll talk about later on, and then select your data source. In this case, I'm going to be talking to my users database. I'm going to call this get users by country because we're going to be doing that. And now let's see the input. The input section is where you're going to define the parameters that the users that we're going to be using this package needs to pass in order for the package to work. You can also define default values for it so it still works even though you don't pass any type of parameter to it. So let's define our first input, and it's going to be named country. And I'm going to define United States to be the default value. So now let's use that input into our actual query. So I'm going to be getting all data from users where the country is going to be equal to the powerful data binding feature from Appsmith, which we just use double curly brackets and we can get values from other places. In this case, it's going to be inputs. That's the name of the, how do we reference the inputs, and then country, which is the name that we just gave this input. So if we run it, we will see that indeed we're getting all of the users from the United States country. That's great. Let's use this package on an Appsmith app now. Let's publish it. This is very important. And we just published our package version 0.0.1. Amazing. So let's go back to Appsmith and let me create just a sample application so you can see how it works. Let me get a text and I'm going to be just putting users from Canada. If I can type correctly. User from Canada. Let me bring a table so we can see that, and let's create a new query. Let's select new query, and there you will see now the query module. So all you have to do is create a new query based upon this query module, and now you don't see anything of the query itself. That's great for encapsulating the code and being able to reuse them in multiple places, even though maybe your developers are not super, users that knows about SQL. That's fine. So I'm going to say no, my country is going to be Canada itself. I'm going to call this get users by country, Canada. And that's it. And if we run this module now, we can see the information about users, but those whose country is Canada. So it's great. So now all I have to do is go back to the UI, connect data, and select the get users by country Canada, and that's it. That's pretty powerful. So now what if we want to extend this? Let's say we don't want to hard code this for users only for Canada, and we want to create a dropdown for which country we want to get data about. So let's do that. Let's bring a new UI element, and I'm going to be using a select, and I'm going to be saying that this is going to be United States. It's going to be United States. This is going to be Canada. I can get rid of this option right here. There you go. And I'm going to be saying that United States is the default value. and label it's pick your country. Now we can remove this because we're not going to be using that. And now here's the most powerful thing about this. Again, data binding. So if we grab the selected option from this select one, which I'm going to be calling country. Now let's go back to the query and we can do data binding here and say I want to get country that selected option, selected value or label. In my case, I'm going to be using the value, which is pretty much the same. So now if we run this application, and the last thing is the event. We want to on option change to define a new event, which is going to be executing a query, get users by country Canada, and that's it. Now if we run this, let's define Canada. Now we're seeing the results from Canada, but if we change it to United States, now we're seeing the changes for the United States country. There you go, data binding all over the place, from the UI to the query, and then from the query to the package itself. Now that's extremely powerful. Now we want to extend this. Let's say we want to input a limit for the options that we want to bring. So let's define the input for limit. I'm going to say that the limit is going to be by default 100. And now let's call limit. It's going to be the inputs again, inputs that limit, which is the one that we just defined. So now all of the applications that are using this package are not going to have a problem by not enabling this new input that we just defined. Everything should continue to work the same, which is great because they're using the version that we were published earlier. Now let's publish a new version. Now this version is going to have the implementation of the limit on the query, but all of the other applications who are using is not going to have any problem with that. So if we see our application, everything is working fine. You know, we filter by Canada, everything is working fine. But now if we go back, we can see that this query now has a new implementation, which is the limit one. So we can define now in the UI. We can now bring a input maybe. And we're going to say this is going to be a number type of input. The default value is going to be 100. And then let's define the limit as the label. And last thing we're going to do is we're going to change the onSubmit to execute a query, the same query. Let's not reset on submit. And last thing is let's implement this. Let me call this limit input as limit. That's going to be the name of my input here. And now we can reference that here using again data binding. Let's call limit that text. So there you go. Now if we test this application and we change, I want to get users from United States and I just want to get 10 results. So there you go. Now we see the table here. We got only 10 records for users in the United States, and I can combine that. I can say users from Canada and only one result. And there you go. That's the powerful world of packages, as you can see right now. So now let's build something more real life scenario now that you understand the basics of it with an actual real application. Alright, so now that we know the basics of packages, let's see a more close to real life example. For this particular workspace of an agency, we have 3 different apps, one for the marketing, sales application, and a support application. So for the sales app, what we're looking at is information about sales. This is something that their sales representative are going to be using for understanding how they're doing customers and order over the last month, total revenue, average order, a sales over time graph, top customers by money spent, sales by country, where we can see a chart of how we're doing in different countries selling, sales by country summary, where we can see a total revenue by country, order, average order value, amount of orders, last 10 sales, and then we can see all of the different sales where we can see filter by country, by status, by minimum amount, maximum amount, date filter, etc. So it's a full application for the sales team. Now we have the marketing thing, which is very different, where we can see marketing related data. In this case, they want to see campaign performance review data. How are they doing for all their campaigns? How many customers have they reached? Total orders, total revenue. Very similar customer segment analysis, where they can see for all of the segments they have, total revenue, average order value, how many orders, a customer acquisition trend, a top performing countries, and so beyond. This is marketing related data. And on the other hand, they have this sales dashboard where we can see a glance all of the tickets, how many they're open, how many in progress, average resolution time, ticket volume over time, latest tickets, and then all of the tickets where they can solve the issues, where they can prioritize, they can filter, request refunds, and use Appsmith workflows and other stuff. So long story short, what I wanted you to see is that we have three very different apps between each other. They see different data, but they talk to the same database and same data sources in this case. And so there's opportunity for reusability over there. Also, the team is also requesting to create more functionality, more transactional features, which you can totally do in Appsmith. It's not just data visualization. And also they want to do like date range filters for this graph and other interactivity. So basically, if we see those apps code, there's an opportunity for reusability here. So for example, if we see the sales app, we will see this graph over here called sales by country summary, where we can see revenue, order average value, and amount of orders per country. And if we go to the marketing app, we will see similar data about the customer segment, where we can see again average revenue, average order, and amount of orders per the customer segments that we have. So they're different data, but they're very similar, and they talk to the same databases. There's a huge opportunity for a package over there. If we see the queries, we will see that, let me see, sales summary by segment. We will see that basically it's just a select where we're getting a summary for the revenue, an average for the average order value, and a count of orders by segment. And we have a couple of inner joins and left joins, in this case to bring data from the customer table, etc. And then we're ordering by total revenue. If we go to the sales app and we also see the query, we will see that it's a little bit similar. We will get information about orders, and we will get a summary for the total revenue, a count for the total orders, an average for the average order value, and now we're grouping by country name. So they're showing very similar data, but in different manners. So again, this is a great opportunity for a package. So let's actually build this package. So both applications can feed themselves from the same package, and then we can enable more features like date ranges, limits, etc., and continuously involving that package for those both applications. So let's create a new package here. And the first thing we'll have to do is, again, go here, create a new query module, and use the enterprise query database that we have here. Now I'm going to call this sales by query. This is a query that's going to get data of sales by different meanings. And the first thing I'm going to do is define the inputs that I need. So I'm going to need a start date to be one of my inputs, and I'm going to define a just default value of a date here, something from 2020. End date. It's going to be another input that I'm going to need, and I'm going to define my end date to be, for example, this year on November. Again, all of these inputs can be changed whenever you implement this query, right? Now let's define another one. This is going to be the limit, and just by default, I'm going to make it 1,000. Another input I'm going to define is the group by. And the group by, it's going to be in this case either country or segment, because remember that the sales app is getting data by country and the marketing team needs it by segment. And then also the order by, how we want to order this data by. And the order by is going to be by default, in this case, as total orders. But again, all of these can be changed. Order by, total order. So there you go. We have start date, end date, limit, group by, and order by. Now I have the query already done here, but let's go over it because it's very straightforward. So the first thing we gotta know is, again, it's very similar to the one that we have on the sales app. It's just gonna get sales data from orders and a join to customers table and to the countries table. Very similar in this case, but we're also adding a new where statement to implement the inputs for start date and end date, so that way we can support date range filters for this particular query. So there you go, nothing crazy over here, just implementing the inputs that start date and inputs that end date for the where statement in between. Now we have a case. as you know, Postgres support cases, and this is amazing to do this type of things. We can have, depending when the inputs that group by is equal to segment, then we're going to max out to the customer segment. If not, if the input that group by is country, very similar, we're going to just go for the country name. And that's for the category. And again, this is going to be very similar to the ones we just saw. It's going to get the average total amounts, the summary of the total revenue, and a count on the amount of orders. That's basically what we're getting. Now we're going to implement another case, in this case for either we want to get segment data or country data. And also the last thing is depending on the order by. If you want to order by total orders, then we're going to be counting by the distinct order ID. Or if we want to get or order by the average order value, then we're going to be averaging on the total amount field for the orders. And by the end, we're just going to be implementing the limit, which is going to be using the input that limits. So there you go. The query is just a standard SQL statements using the inputs that we define, and now we can run it. So by default, it should be getting something. In this case, it's going to be getting data grouped by country, as you can see, Germany, United States, Canada, total orders, total revenue, and average order value. Here's the data that we need. Now, if we change this by segment and we run it again, we're going to get total different data. In this case, again, order information but grouped by segment. The category is silver, platinum, and gold, getting the amount of orders, total revenue, and average order value. This is great. This is ready to start implementing in those two applications. So let's publish this. And once we publish it, now we can go back to our application. And let me just refresh here so we can get the package information. Let's get a new query. And now we will see the sales by query. Let's select that one. And it's going to be prompted with the default values that we did. For now, I'm just going to leave it as it is because, oh no, not as it is. I want it by country because the sales team needed by country. And if we run it, there you go. Here's the result. We're getting the data that we need. So let's go also to the marketing app. Let's refresh here. And now let's create another query using the sales by query package. And this one indeed is going to be using the segment grouped by total orders. That's totally fine. And if we run it, there you go. We're getting the segment data. So let's go back to the sales application. And if we see the graph that it's fitting by this data is this one right here, we can see that it's actually getting the data from a data parser. So the data parser in this case is a JavaScript object, which is basically grouping the data that we get from the query and adopting it to the structure that the chart needs it. So that means that if we go to our JavaScript section, we will see the data parser, and then we will see the summary sales by country. And as you can see, that what it's doing is just getting the sales summary by country, that data information, and is passing it to this function called transform sales data for chart. And what it's doing is basically mapping over the different objects and retrieving them in the structure of X and Y key pair. For in this case, the chart data to be structured in the way that it needs. And it's actually, we run it. Let me run it here. You can see that the structure of the information is in the way that the chart needs it. Now, if we go back to the marketing app, it's happening pretty much the same. It's also transforming the data in the same structure, but in this case, it's getting data for the sales by segment, and it's structuring the same way. Now, this is a great opportunity for a JavaScript package as well, but we're not there yet. That's for the following thing that we're going to do. Now, we're talking about queries here, but the next thing is JavaScript objects, but there's a big opportunity over there, obviously. So now what we have to do right now is just, let me change this, sales by country. No, this is the marketing, sales by segment. There you go, sales by segment. And if we go to the JavaScript function, now instead of passing the data from this query, we're going to be passing from sales by segment that data. And if everything goes well, I should be able to run this and still get the data in the way that I need. And if we go back to the sales application, again, summary sales by country, we should be able to go back to this one, sales by country, run it again. Yep. There we have sales by country. Let's call it sales by country package. So we know this is coming from the package. All right, sales by country package, because we already had that name. There you go. And now if we replace this sales by country with sales by country package, sales by country package that data, and if we run it again, there you go, the data is being structured in the way that we need. So if we go back to the UI and we play our application, we see our application, we can see that now sales by country summary in the sales application. And again, here we go back to the UI, we see our application, and customer segment analysis are both showcasing data coming from the package, no longer coming from their own query. Now, as you can see, this is extremely powerful because now we can start implementing the date range filters and the limit functions without having to build two different queries and support two different queries. This is great for maintainability and reducing the amount of bugs. Also, there's huge opportunities here because if we see other queries, for example, let me see, I don't know, recent orders right here. This one has limit by 10 hard-coded. If we see sales by query, we have an interval of 90 days hard-coded as well in the query. So all of these things about technical depth that you start little by little adding to the technical depth ladder is going to become a huge problem in the future that you can start implementing in packages by having easier maintainability, just a single source of truth for your packages, and that's it. So you have seen the power of how easy it is to build a package that is supported by multiple applications independently. If the data they manage is totally different, you can reuse queries and you can reuse JavaScript, which is the next thing we're going to be doing for this particular case. This is extremely powerful. And there you have it. We just scratched the surface of what's possible with reusable queries in Appsmith Packages. Remember, this isn't about saving time, but that's a big plus, but it's actually about elevating the quality of your applications, ensuring consistency across your projects, and allowing your team to focus on what really matters, which is solving business problems and creating value. In our next video, we'll explore another powerful feature of Appsmith Packages, which is reusable JavaScript modules. Trust me, if you thought this was a game changer, you ain't seen nothing yet. So until the next time, happy coding, and may your queries be ever reusable.